Welcome to the Airiam Podcast. This podcast covers topics related to cyber and human resilience. The content is geared towards owners and CEOs of small to medium-sized companies, as well as IT and cybersecurity leaders. My name's Art Ocain, and I lead cybersecurity and incident response at Airiam. Today, we're talking about NOC and SOC roles in an organization. Sometimes security roles are given to network professionals, and it can be confusing. So we wanted to clear the air there and probably dive into some technology, some tools around that, and really talk about, what the differences are and what they're using and what they need. I have a guest, Andrew, MDR Director from UnderDefense, one of our greatest partners, and wanted to dive in with him on these questions. So, Andrew, welcome to the show. And one question that we always ask every guest, what is your morning routine?
Hey, good morning, Art. Yeah, thank you for joining and thank you for inviting us over for this podcast. It's a great honor for me and all my teammates. The morning routine, well, that's a tough question, actually. You should start with something easier, I guess. Well, usually my day starts with, bringing my kid to school. So it's a good challenge that I need to go over each and every morning, but it keeps me busy. It keeps me up to date. Having my morning coffee, I always look through the morning news. So hacker news, something that might be of use during the business day. Trying to fuel not only the body but also the mind during these morning exercises. And that's what I encourage everyone doing. Just try to spend as much time as possible trying to invest in yourself. So it's doing these challenges first, and then I would say prioritizing. That's what is my morning all about. You need to take everything that it was within your inbox, within your Slack, whatever systems, within your cell phones, and then try to figure out what you want to focus on first. And this is something that probably challenges me the best.
Amen. Yeah, I between email, Teams messages, text, etc. There's a lot to go through every morning, and it is hard to prioritize. When I introduced you, I told everybody that you were the MDR director. Now, although I know what MDR means, some of our listeners may not know what MDR is. Can you explain what MDR is and kind of how that relates to SOC and security?
Oh, indeed. I know that modern cybersecurity, it might be so complicated, especially when you hear everything about this X, M, N, R, and all of the other letters. Basically, MDR stands for Managed Detection and Response. And for Managed Detection and Response, we mean that the security team do not only detect threats within your environment, it helps you to remediate those threats. So we help to automate, we help to investigate, we help to make sure that everything stays clear within your infrastructure. And there is a lot of relations to SOC, there is a lot of relations to NOC, there is the topic of our discussion today, of course, a lot of back and forth to these tools and people and processes. But in a nutshell, you want to make sure that you have a clear visibility with what you do. And on the other hand, not only have the visibility, but do something about it. So this is what MDR stands for.
Great. Yeah. I know a lot of companies, their SOC is really an alert center, and they're just kind of, they receive an alert and their response is really just making a phone call. So,
no, absolutely. Absolutely. And I would hate to say, that SOC is just about alerting. It's not about you saying that, hey, there is a fire, check it out. Yeah. Yep. You want to make sure that there is something that needs to be done around it.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. So when we're talking about NOC, I several years in my career, I was a NOC engineer in a data center. And, so I was dealing with networking. I was dealing with firewall management, switch and router management, monitoring traffic going in and out of the network. And security was a piece of it. But my main job was connectivity and making sure everything was up and running and making sure the network was fast. And when there was like a DOS attack going on, a denial of service attack, I was, responding to it from the network layer. But, most of my job every day was making sure that the network stayed running and, handling those network upgrades and IP addressing changes and and things like that. So, that's like my experience from being a member of the NOC as the Network Operations Center. But I know a lot of organizations, like, they bring SOC roles into that. They're like, well, you're watching the network anyway. You're already having to deal with denial of service attacks. We're going to give security monitoring expectations to you. And so then, like, there's an IDS, which, as a NOC engineer, we know nothing about. And there's all these logs generated from all these, connections, and where people are asking us, are we under attack? Are we not? And as a NOC, we may not really know that. So it's sometimes we do. Sometimes we have the right tools and the right stuff already set up, so it kind of makes it easy to see. But a lot of times when you're in the NOC, you don't really understand security. You're really just thinking about the network. So
it's all about the goals. I mean, definitely, and you need to focus on what your department, what your role is designed for. And
Absolutely.
as you mentioned, if it's a NOC, that's basically upkeeping the infrastructure, making sure that the resources are being available. And you can speak of no security if you have actually no good NOC function within the organization.
Exactly.
Like, it's a basic one. So I admire what you just mentioned, because I know it's a really tough work, especially if you're working 24/7, right? Especially if there is a lack of security engineers within your department or your company, and you need to do everything all around, no matter what you do, no matter if you're out of office or wherever. So basically, right, what you mentioned is, NOC primary focus would be to upkeep systems, to make sure that the performance is in the exact level needed, that we have networking systems within the patching norms, that everything is done correctly. I would say that the level of network optimization is something that you need to focus on when you are a NOC specialist. By the way, how did you actually handle this troubleshooting and maintenance? Was it something that you did the automation around, or like what other tricks that you used to have?
At the time, the only automation we had was for monitoring. So we were doing traffic monitoring, SNMP monitoring. We had PRTG in place, so we were watching all the traffic going through all the interfaces. So really the only automation we had was monitoring. Everything else, patching, configuring, everything else was manual. So nowadays there's more tools, but back in the day, I was having to manage configurations manually on these devices, and that was configuration management was a big bear. It was and it still is. If you're a NOC engineer and you're having to do everything manually, you're managing a bunch of config files. And where modern network management tools will help manage those configurations, and a lot of things like Cisco with their DNA center, et cetera, everything's kind of linked in, so it's more software defined networking nowadays. But at the time everything was manual, so it was very painful, and so there wasn't really a lot of automation. Now, in kind of a DevOps mindset, people are doing a lot of their network changes with Ansible or with Chef, and they're doing a lot of automation around it. And but still, it's definitely their priority is monitoring, troubleshooting, resolving issues, making sure there's uptime, troubleshooting things around bandwidth and latency, making sure your video and phone calls are working right. It's really kind of thinking about network operations as being like the plumbers of IT, making sure the pipes work, and ensuring everything works that way. But when we kind of pivot towards SOC, SOC is actually adding a lot to it. Like, you're having to think about threat detection and security monitoring on top of that. In your experience, managing MDR, what is kind of the goal or the purpose of the SOC?
Absolutely. I mean, like, we do rely on a lot of things that NOC does, because as we mentioned before, it's impossible to have effective SOC operations without having at least this basic NOC operations being done. But for SOC functions, I would say that your primary goal is to make sure that you have an efficient threat detection. If you cannot detect threat, that probably your SOC is not worth a thing. Then once you have this threat detection, you focus on security monitoring overall, because it's not about just one detection that you do. You need to have a constant system that is giving you some answers, that gives you valuable insights into this. As the next step, the essential next step would of course be the incident response, because when you have a lot of threats, you need to understand what you do next with these incidents. So incident response is a part of the complex solution that managed detection response teams do, and it relies a lot on NOC and SOC functions both. Because you do need to understand how the systems operate between each other. Basically, I would want to say that it's a complex of people, tools, and processes that you need to align between themselves to make sure that you have the streamlined incident response process. And what happens next after this incident response? It's of course the forensics and investigation one, because it's not only closing the gap at the moment. You want to have the solid plan for future. What do we do next? What happens if? Did we do anything wrong, and what needs to be updated in order to mitigate such threats in the future? So this is currently, in a nutshell, if you would want to speak in a simple language, but SOC would provide you the answers. Are there any threats within my infrastructure? While NOC will give you this the trends to keep this system running all the time.
Right.
You mentioned that you had these security issues as well during the NOC part of the career.
Yes.
What were the challenges that you faced? I mean, was it lack of time? Was it maybe not interested in these topics? Maybe something else that?
Yeah, there was several things, but lack of time is one thing, because the NOC is usually pushed to do all kinds of uptime projects and resiliency projects, and replacing switches, replacing wiring, replacing NICs in all the servers, replacing doing IP address moves from one section of IP addresses to another section of IP addresses. So we had a lot of projects to do, and it was like dealing with security incidents was a headache. And not only that, but our skill set was really network focused. It wasn't really focused at security. So when we were looking at a DOS, we got denial of service attacked because it was a data center I was working in. That was kind of a regular thing. We had to deal with customers that were in the data center getting attacked. And when they would do a denial of service attack, it would affect the entire network. It would slow everything to a halt. And we'd have to try to figure out, where's it coming from? Can we block that? Can we block it upstream? Can we call, AT&T or Verizon or whoever our upstream providers are and have them block those IP addresses and that traffic so it doesn't even get to our network? Because as soon as it gets to our network, it's still hitting our firewall. Even if our firewall is rejecting the traffic, it's still filling up the pipe on the way to our firewall. So the denial of service attack is still, even if you block everything at your network, it's still coming to your network. So you're still still filling up that pipe. So that, we had servers that were taken over by threat actors, and they were using it for botnets and things like that. We had servers that were being used for spam, where a threat actor would be sending out hundreds of thousands of messages, spam messages every day. And we would have to track down where on the network's that happening, because there were thousands and thousands of servers in this data center. And we had to figure out where in the network this was coming from, what we had to shut down, and isolate that server. And then, really we were addressing it that way, as kind of isolating that part of the network and then figuring out, what we have to do to keep that from happening again. It may be blocking a port, it may be blocking an IP address, that kind of thing. But that's pretty much the extent of it. We didn't have any forensic understanding. So it's like, at the time, we couldn't have done a forensic investigation and told you who was doing this, or the purpose, or why they were doing this. we were pretty much just focused on keeping the network running. So these things were in the way of keeping the network running. So we were trying to stop it.
Yeah, I'm actually thinking that, everything that you explained is just the other form of security incidents that we handle. I mean, for typical or common SOC incidents, phishing attempts, data breaches, something like unauthorized access would have the similar activity that you face. And it's just the other version of this. The same like, vulnerability exploits or even the denial of service attacks. You can always treat these attacks on the verge of NOC and SOC, and it's really important, especially when you have separate teams working on within one environment, to have this good cooperation between teams to make sure that they have clear visibility and know what each team needs to be doing, in particular to their responsibilities. So I would probably say that it's important to understand that suspicious network traffic is not a standalone product. It's not something that only NOC or only SOC is able to look at. It's a complex solution, complex problem, whatever we call it. But you need to address it in a way to see that the tree is behind the wall, that there is something over there, over the horizon.
Absolutely. And as we've evolved, and NOC has been around for forever. SOC has been in the last 12 years, last 10 years, it's kind of evolved. It's newer, SOC is newer than NOC. As companies have grown, they've kind of built these separate teams, and they have to learn how to play together and cooperate and coordinate, especially on an incident. But outside of an incident, like how does the SOC work with the NOC? In my experience, the SOC is requesting integrations with network equipment. And so the NOC is helping configure those integrations, things like that. But one of the weaknesses that I've seen with a lot of organizations is they kind of still expect that NOC to pick up that security load. They just think they clump everything into IT, and they just say, okay, NOC, you still need to do all this threat hunting and investigations and everything relating to security. So, in your opinion,
I would probably say it all depends on the structure of the company. First of all, what you mentioned is probably the typical problems and questions that arise when you have separate teams of NOC and SOC. And from our experience, it's medium to enterprise companies that could allow themselves to have this type of engagements, to have this type of departments, and that's this bring up some pros and cons for the separated NOC and SOC teams. I would say that, as you mentioned, for the biggest con would be the coordination part between teams, making sure that everyone understands their roles and responsibilities. There is something like blame shifting or this lack of accountability between different departments. I would even say that higher operational and staffing cost is something that you need to pay attention to, because it's always a challenge to manage more people than less, of course. But now you come to the pros of this. To some degree, you can have the faster response, because you know that in case everything works fine, everything is smooth, and each and every part of this company, this department, they know their responsibilities and they act as they are expected to. And now you can always optimize tools better, because each and every team is now using their own tools. Of course, they can be using something together, like SIEM solution, for example, or some log aggregation tools or whatever. But you still have now tool owner, you have someone responsible for optimizing this, you have someone responsible for getting insights out of it. And now, for the most important part would be, as you mentioned during the whole conversation today, would be the specialized skills. So the lone soldier playing around in the field, it's good to have at least one, but when you have the whole army fighting and specialized in various fields, that helps a lot. So for this matter, I would say that coordination part, optimization part is the most important one. When we speak about the teams that have SOC and NOC integrated, again, this is probably applicable to small to medium companies when you lack resources, when you want to have unified visibility in the performance. And let's be frank and open. In a lot of companies, in a lot of organizations, you do not have a separate department for NOC and SOC. It's just, too expensive. It's just too much for them to handle. So faster coordination in this case is not something that you target for, but you look for the quality instead. And you can be struggling with the complex incident in this case, because you might lack some in-depth expertise. On the other hand, at least you pick up this activity. You do not drop it. You do not say that, I'm in my personal house hiding from security incidents and no one can get inside of it. I would say that integrated NOC and SOC team, they require very careful prioritization. And if you have this good process designed, then there is a good chance of having both teams, one team working effectively in this case. There would be no this finger pointing saying that someone is responsible. There is only, let's say, a couple of people and they know who is responsible for what they do. I think that it makes a lot of stress for the team instead. So I've seen a good practices of the hybrid approach, actually. Maybe something that could be used within various organizations, but you can always have a single team that watches both NOC and SOC until it gets to some degree of a security incident. That's where you need a security expertise. Like kind of cutting false positive in the typical SOC terminology. So you handle this triage, you do the routine, but then there is a specialized tier 2 analyst or tier 3 analyst, whatever we call them, that will be doing the in-depth analysis of each and every security NOC or security incident or NOC incident, depending on the classification. I don't know, did you have the experience or maybe knowledge of companies working in this direction?
Yeah, so when you see it, usually they're kind of DevOps mindset companies that have a SecOps team. And so like security is kind of built into the network operations team. And the advantage there is they're thinking about security all the time because it's a part of, their team. So everything is being designed with security in mind. And so you're shifting left a lot of that security architecture and security ideas to the beginning. So if you're putting in new firewalls, putting in new switches, routers, if you're designing your network again, any kind of network project then has security involved from the beginning. And it's not a blame game of shifting jobs back and forth between security and IT operations. It can be challenging to manage from a leader's point of view because security and IT operations are kind of not usually on the same page. A lot of times they're different leaders. So you'll have, a CISO type person and a CIO type person. And a lot of times they have responsibilities and goals in the business that are opposing each other. Security is worried about dropping risk and avoiding incidents and then reducing the size of incidents and the expense of incidents. And CIO is worried about innovating and pushing the envelope and moving faster and everything. So, that can trickle down to that team when you have an integrated team. The security people on that team may not have the same exact objectives as the IT people on the team. So, but there are super advantages of having that team as a SecOps team because, you're not sitting there trying to secure everything and make everything compliant and everything afterwards. Everything is, thought about in the design phase, and everything is built to be secure.
I was just about to drop that bomb on the compliance and ask you, how do you think would be sufficient, building operations of DevOps and SecOps when there is a compliance part here as well? And you just mentioned it because it's really important. I've seen that a lot of companies struggle to achieve the compliance needs.
Yeah.
And because we have DevOps focusing on one thing and SecOps focusing on quite another ones. Then there is this CIO or someone else responsible, CISO within the organization, who is pushing some other direction. It's it should be challenging for the particular DevOps or particular SecOps guy to be sitting in his place and decide what needs to be done next.
Yeah, it definitely is. And with compliance, a lot of times is pushed down after the fact. So you have an existing product, you have an existing company, network, all operations are running at full speed. And now you have this extra paperwork that you have to do to go and check through everything and make sure that all your controls are in place. So the idea of shifting left applies there as well. So bring that compliance into the beginning of the process. So when you're designing everything, you're putting the controls and the documentation needed for your compliance in at the beginning. So that should be a part of that team as well, and a part of its responsibilities as well. So there's a lot of advantages to that hybrid team. What I noticed with the hybrid team, though, is like, okay, cybersecurity is such a wide thing. Like everything from incident response, forensics, threat hunting, and the offensive side is completely separate too. And so there's a lot of things to deal with that a small team, let's say it is a hybrid NOC and SOC team, there's no way they can have expertise to really cover everything. So I found that working with kind of a third party is really helpful in those instances, and making sure that I have someone to escalate problems to. I have someone to handle the offensive side if I'm handling the defensive side. If I'm handling the monitoring, somebody else will help the threat hunting, things like that. So I find that, when you have a small team like that, it's good to have some outside help to help manage everything. That makes a big difference in really how you perform.
Absolutely. And I think that, for most companies, it's a quite challenging thing when you get to building or improving NOC or SOC teams. So you need to think carefully. Either you want to invest into people, into tools, or maybe into as you mentioned, the compliance needs from the very beginning. And I think that first of all, if we were to give any advice to our audience today, would be to start with clear business objectives, what we want to achieve, and where the weak spots are. Identifying those, doing something like an assessment, stress testing of your organization. I always say that doing something like red teaming or purple teaming helps a lot in terms of SOC. Same with NOC, I guess. So start with this, define what you need to do, try to build the right team structure. It's not about having always NOC and SOC teams separated, or it might be a good case to have them combined. On the other hand, think carefully about it, because it's a challenging thing. And in a lot of cases, you might get overwhelmed with lack of expertise, alert fatigue, not understanding of who is responsible for the exact part of containment remediation efforts. This is something that we need to focus on. The next thing probably would be the tooling, right? Understanding the tool set helps a lot. We do not need to do everything on ourselves anymore. We rely heavily on automation with both NOC and SOC, and we want to make sure that tools bring this speed, this value of 21st century that we have, doing everything fast, achieving results in a matter of seconds. And that's why we say that often automating at the early stages, using tools like SOARs help just, skyrocket all of the response and all the detection that we have. All right, I know a lot of companies, a lot of departments within NOC and SOC struggle with playbooks and collaboration. What would you advise on this?
Yeah, so one of the things is the network team a lot of times will have an automation stack that can be leveraged by the SOC or could be integrated into the SOAR in order to help with response functions. A lot of times with playbooks, the NOC will have a set of playbooks around downtime. It's like, okay, if I need to bounce this firewall and if I need to reconfigure this is what I'm doing. If I need to fail over from this router to this other router, this is my procedure. Like, they'll have playbooks around that, and it's usually around resiliency. It's usually around failing over to DR. It's usually things like that, which are helpful in an incident and in a disaster situation. And so those kind of playbooks are helpful to have integrated in with the security function. So one of the things, the SOAR can be used to implement. Just think of the SOAR as like a robot, and you can have a trigger that triggers an action. And so all of those DR functions that the NOC does, and all the remediation functions that the NOC does, can be done automatically through playbooks using the SOAR from the security point of view. So, hey, this attack's happening over here. Okay, block these things, shut down these ports, fail over the service, bring up the service in this other AWS instance, whatever. All of that can be automated. So it's time from a playbook point of view for us to start thinking together and, think about, okay, how can these playbooks be leveraged by both teams? How can, the automation platform that the NOC has be used by the SOC and the SOAR? The SOAR can trigger an Ansible playbook to run that the network team has. So I think kind of having a meeting or several meetings and kind of tearing through those together is something those different teams should do if they are still different teams. But I think that understanding that there is this the SIM and the SOAR kind of can lend a lot of superpower to a NOC and a SOC, and can help. That automation layer is something that really needs to be kind of optimized, and takes a lot of work to optimize. And anybody can buy a SIM, and then you have this thing you paid a lot of money for that's just sitting there. It isn't until it's really starts to be used that you start to reap the benefits. So in my mind, those playbooks can just get out of hand. You can have a lot of paper playbooks, a lot of processes. It's bringing the automation together is the trick, in order to really kind of see all that see the advantages.
Mm-hmm. I think that, the only playbook that you can always call a playbook is something that brings you the value. And in this case, if you could do anything around event correlation, around, let's say, noise reduction, triage automation, if it's something that helps you to detect anomalies using these playbooks, or even the real-time dashboards, when you have this information about modern threats, when you have visibility into service, that helps tremendously. I mean, you do not want to wait for the alert to start the triage. You can always start it by yourself when there is a trigger within the system. The other thing that I was thinking of is that sometimes it's even important to try to outsource any part of this. I mean, we were speaking about tools. Tools is a form of outsourcing when you get the information and value out of the security itself, out of NOC itself, out of operations. But for some degree, to some cases, you might want to have this hybrid model when you, for example, have your in-house expert team that will be doing on the high-level incidents, high-level DR, as you mentioned, and then all of the routine, all of the low-level exercises will be managed and handled by some other teams. Why not? This case, you just decrease the headache from your team and focuses on what's really important.
I think any big initiative, any new tool purchase, a lot of mature teams, I know my team does this, my centralized services team, which is kind of like the NOC and SOC team, push back whenever we buy a new tool, because they're like, this is one more thing we have to manage. We have no time to manage another tool. That's cool that we have this initiative to do something awesome, but they don't want to do it because they're already stressed out. Like, they don't have room to do another thing and manage another thing and set up more integrations and set up more tools and manage more tools. So to us, outsourcing, management of tools that we get is super important. because our team, we can only hire so many people. It's like there's a point where it doesn't make sense to just keep hiring somebody with every tool you buy. So it's important to have a managed service behind that, so that we can say, okay, where we have a SIM and a SOAR, but we don't have to manage them. Somebody else is optimizing it. Somebody else is helping write the threat detections around it and doing the threat detection engineering. We can look at it and use the dashboard and add whatever we need to it, but ultimately, it's not our pain in the butt to have to manage. It's somebody else's. So to us, that's kind of the optimum situation, is to not have it be something that we have to worry about. Just because our team, if I buy a new tool, there's thousands of new cool tools every day in cybersecurity. If you walk the floor in RSA or Black Hat or whatever, you'll see 1,000 things that look awesome, and they are awesome technologies. But if I wanted to buy them, somebody has to implement and manage that in our organization. And if I bring any of those tools back, my team will say no. We're not managing that. It's a cool tool, but we don't want to have to manage that. So bundling it up with a managed service, and so you're outsourcing the management of that tool. So you're reaping the benefits. You're still able to use that tool, but not have to worry about actually managing it. That's really where my team needs to live. And I'm sure there's a lot of teams that are like that as well.
All right. If it was one tool that you pick up from the NOC perspective, what would you name it? Because from SOC, I think that I would name SIEM for the most important one.
Yep.
I'm just thinking, about pros and cons of various ones.
Yes.
I would say that the most important one, the vital one for SOC would be SIEM. How about from the NOC perspective? What would you name?
Well, so there's so many tools we use, but for me, traffic analysis is important. So we use AUVIC. A lot of companies use PRTG. I've used PRTG before. So being able to see that traffic and say, okay, interface 5 on this switch is blowing all this traffic through, and seeing what kind of traffic it is, that kind of stuff, that insight, that monitoring is super useful. There's other stuff we use on the configuration management side now. We're using AUVIC as well for backing up configs and configuration management. But there's a ton of tools out there for that. But really, that PRTG level of traffic monitoring is super important to us. We need to be able to see when Bob brings a new iPhone in and it's syncing all the data and to their iCloud and taking down the network. We need to see that it was Bob's phone doing this.
And we need to verify that this activity was a legit one. That it was not actually a Jane or a John, but it was Bob, and that he was allowed by his manager to do this.
Exactly. Now, on the when we're talking about outsourcing, I know that UnderDefense has an incredibly skilled team for managing SIMs and managing the SOAR, your Maxi platform. Can you kind of give our listeners a little bit of a overview of some of the things that you guys offer as services and can manage?
All right. Well, first of all, thank you for this opportunity. I wouldn't want to keep this at the marketing level, but basically, UnderDefense, we do have a lot of expertise in professional services, in detection, in managed detection and response, what we mentioned. So for this, we build the UnderDefense Maxi platform that is hyper automation. It helps you to have a SOAR-like capabilities. So you do not need to buy these tools. You do not need to invest extra. You just, our philosophy is to actually use as much of the resources that customers and clients actually own. So taking their SIEMs, EDRs, taking their network data information. And on top of this, we have a little bit of spice, of UnderDefense spice. So a little bit of UnderDefense cybersecurity experts, a little bit of UnderDefense incident response, a little bit of detections, the tailored ones, especially to your needs. And that's when we actually get the cybersecurity that works. That's when we have the zero churn for the last 6 years. That's when we receive the reports that satisfy not only the C-level, but the technical experts. That's when we have the compliance that is, it's a part of the security itself. It's not a standalone product now. It's something that goes along with it. And we do not try to distinguish that as the DevOps, SecOps role, NOC role, SOC role. We are passionate about having the overall partnership-like relationship, and that's what our customers value us for.
Now, I love that you said you don't want you'll try to use as much as you can that the customer has to keep their costs down. To me, that's super. Looking at budgeting for third-party help. Do they want us to rip and replace everything? Are they going to work with our EDR? Are they going to work with our SIEM? Are they going to work with our tools? And so that's really helpful. And it just made me think of a follow-up question. So when you're working with a SOC team, that has some tools already, when you're thinking about a SIEM, or a, EDR, or other tools that they may have at their disposal. What do you think is, kind of how I mentioned PRTG and AVIC are the key tools I use from a NOC point of view? When you're working with your customers, what tools should they have in their SOC?
That's probably one of the most important questions when you start each and every engagement. And that's what we do within the assessment phase. So kind of understanding the profile of the customer is something that you want to focus on first. For the technology company, there would be one objectives and goals. For the human-led company, like, a consultancy or HR company, there would be quite different ones. I would definitely want to have the insights into endpoints. So we might think about any type of technology that provide you these insights. Let's focus on EDR at the moment, because this is, I would say that probably 80% of modern threats, they come through endpoints. So having this layer of security protects you probably like no other does. Then you want to focus on employees, everything around their identities, everything around, is there a legitimate connection behind this person? So again, AI usage, I think it was 300% increase in the attempts of ransomware, phishing attempts, social engineering attempts that we've seen during the last quarter. And this kind of scares me a lot, because it's so much easier now to hack people than hack tools, and you pay more attention to those. Now, the other thing that you want to face and you want to actually look at would be correlating data from various sources. Again, clouds, SaaS solutions, anything around databases, and so on and so forth. And we mentioned that SIEM solution or SIEM-like tools help you to have this data within one place. Data lakes, that's like the next level of those. But at least you want to have this capability of correlating data. And why do we plan to come and use the tools that customers own? Is because first of all, you want to drop ROI and make sure that they use it as effectively as possible. But if there are any blind spots, I will be transparent and say that, hey, you know what? I would say that this tool does not provide enough visibility in your case, and we would recommend switching to something else. And this is up to business decision now, up to business risk of the company to decide what to do next. But this is what we focus on, and I think this is something that actually helps to win the businesses, because you do not just come and say that this technology doesn't work and please go ahead with another one. No one wants this approach.
No, you've already invested, and a lot of times you have a year or a 3-year commitment behind some tool that you bought. So getting the most use out of it is, I love that.
And now probably the last, but the most important part would be the fine tuning of those tools. Mm-hmm. So most companies have tools. All of us mostly have firewalls and EDRs and everything, but you want to make sure that they provide valuable insights and valuable information. And that's where a professional services team kicks in. And that's where they help ourselves as well. I'm not saying that we are just doing something extra, but I want my team to get valuable insights out of the infrastructure. I do not want them to be buried alive during their shifts. So, yes. Just helping out from the all aspects of this cooperation is something that brings the total results higher and higher.
Absolutely. Yeah, so to wrap it up, we kind of talked about, NOC, SOC, what their responsibilities are, kind of what it looks like when they work separately and what it looks like when they work together. I kind of seem to like that hybrid approach of them working together in the same team. I think we can get a lot done when they're in the same team together. But then we talked about kind of outsourcing management of tools and some expertise and bringing in like a third-party provider to kind of shore up that team, just to close that skills gap and to add tools and help manage tools. And we kind of talked about some of the tools that we use on the NOC and the SOC and really kind of really where they fit in. Do you have anything else to add before we wrap up, Andrew?
All right, I think that was amazing conversation. The only thing that we need to highlight is that once you want to have NOC and SOC either united or separated, make sure that you understand the pros and cons of each and every solution, and then try to establish your strategy according to these needs.
Absolutely, it's definitely worth stepping back and assessing what you have. A lot of people just keep the team running, and as long as there's not too many fires, they just let it go. And but you may be operating in some level of risk that you don't really understand if you're not going out of the way to assess your NOC and SOC team or that SecOps DevOps team and figure out really kind of, is this working the way it should? Do we need to bring in somebody else? Do we need to refactor, re-architect how this team looks? Yeah, good point. That assessment is something that's not done at any company. Nobody's taking a look at this. They're just looking at head count and can we afford another person on the team?
And then you rush forward.
Exactly. There's not really an assessment going on. Yeah, I really appreciate that insight. Well,
thank you so much. Thank you, Art. It was my ultimate pleasure. And, I'm always happy to have any type of security chat with you. So if you feel that, we can bring any value together, make sure that you invite us again.
Oh, yeah. No, I mean, just talking, I'm thinking about going into some of these tools with you, thinking about, you mentioned some stuff around AI and increased threats there, having some discussions around that and really what we're seeing and what the trends are going forward. There's a lot of stuff we could talk about here. And, I feel like you're a great guest on the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
So thank you so much for your time today. This was a great discussion. For everybody listening, please subscribe to this podcast on whatever platform you're listening on. New episodes will come out every other Wednesday or so. For more information on Airiam, go to www.airiam.com.